The religious symbolism of Halo from Hidden Xperia, featuring Wendigoon. Wendigoon is one of my favorite content creators. I love that guy. So I'm glad to see that he's doing a little collaboration with Hidden Xperia. He's a guy that I react to Halo news a lot because I'm a huge fan of the classic Halo games.
Since the dawn of the franchise, Halo's story, characters, locations, and narrative events have all been deeply rooted in religion. In fact, there were even some people who accidentally predicted the entire Halo story in the 1990s purely by extrapolating various biblical stories to Halo's lore. Halo's connections to religious scripture are some of the most fascinating bits of lore in the entire franchise. They form the entire basis and origin of the universe, and actually run a lot deeper than
So Master Chief Jesus? I never even thought about that. Master Chief Jesus?
most people realize. So today, we're dropping feet first into hell and also heaven to look at the religious significance of Halo's lore. But we aren't going in alone. You see, I'm a dirty heretic, worthy of neither pity nor mercy. A sinner who knows way too little to be qualified to make a video about this topic. But thankfully, today's esteemed guest is quite possibly the most qualified person on the entire internet to help out with that.
Hi everyone, my name is Isaiah, but you probably know me better as Wendigoon. For those that don't know, here on YouTube I make all kinds of videos from conspiracy theories to urban legends and stuff like that. But one thing I touch on a lot is biblical, I guess, lore. Not only did I grow up in Christianity, but I was also a Sunday school teacher, and I guess
The canon of the Bible, if you will.
you could say part-time religious leader for a while, and still try to better myself at better understanding the scriptures day by day. So when Hidden Xperia asked me if I would be willing to come on board to talk about some of the biblical symbolism within Halo, I said yes, because there is a lot of it.
There is a lot of it indeed, so let's waste no more time and begin. How we're going to do this is I'm first going to talk about the Halo meaning of a term, and then Isaiah is going to talk about the biblical meaning of the term.
Like, I knew that there was biblical stuff in Halo, but I never actually dove into the parallels. I guess Wendigoon, as a content creator, did that. But now here I am as a content creator looking into it.
And then I'm going to come back in, if necessary, and talk about how the biblical meaning influences the Halo meaning.
Halo.
Okay, seriously? You actually want me to explain what a Halo is? Okay, sure. The Halos were the Forerunners' last resort against the Flood. Gigantic megastructures built to house species in entirely livable, authentic natural environments, but also to fire a superluminal pulse of cross-phased supermassive neutrinos that destroy the central nervous system of all sentient life in the galaxy. As the age-old adage goes, the Halos don't kill the Flood, but rather they kill its food so it starves to death. Originally, 12 massive Halo rings were created that spanned 30,000 kilometers in diameter, but after much testing, these proved far too large and inefficient, so they were later replaced by a smaller array of 7 Halo rings, each 10,000 kilometers in diameter. The Halos are essentially a galactic reset button. If you fire them all in unison, all sentient life in the galaxy will be killed, the Flood will be starved, and the galaxy will essentially restart.
So Halos don't actually appear anywhere in the Bible. They appear in a lot of depictions surrounding the Bible. Halos,
You know who else wears a Halo? Goku.
trace their roots back to like early Greek mythology, kind of based off of figures like Helios and the sun and the light being around them. So as the Catholic Church began to make artwork of divine figures like Jesus and Mary, they would put these halos around their depictions in order to give them a sort of sacredness or an apartness from the world around them as depicted in art. So off of that, cultures later on just began to use the halo as a symbol of divinity. You see it a lot with like how angels are depicted, or gleams of light surrounding figures like Jesus in a lot of depictions. So even though it's not explicitly in the Bible, the halo is explicitly, at least culturally, a symbol of God and angels and divine nature.
And that all makes perfect sense. Since the very beginning of Halo, the Forerunners have often been referred to as gods, and the Halos are the most significant and sacred of the creations they left behind. Moving on, we have the Master Chief, or Spartan John 117. Chief is humanity's savior. He's the one who defeated the Covenant, defeated the Flood, then rose up again to defeat the Didact, and is now at war with the Banished. He goes by many names, but his most popular, at least alternate name, comes courtesy of the Covenant, who call him the Demon. He's also incredibly lucky. Some might say his luck is even biblical in proportion.
So, with Master Chief's name being John and the designation of 117, you would imagine...
John Chief? JC? I was right.
Imagine that either John 1:17 or John 11:7 is what's being implied with this name. But neither of those verses are super apt in my opinion. For example, John 1:17 says, "For the law was given by Moses, but grace and truth came by Jesus Christ." Which, I mean, if you kind of want to be abstract, you could say that, like, Master Chief may be Jesus in that sentence for bringing new life or being like the hope for mankind or whatever. But that's kind of a stretch, and John 11:7 even more, as it just says, "Then after that he saith he to his disciples, let us go into Judea again," which, I mean, good luck with that one. However, growing up in church, the one...
Yeah, isn't it just like straight up non-existent anymore in Halo universe? Didn't they blow it up? They blew it all up.
17 verse that was most often quoted, or at least the one I remember the most, comes from the book of James. As James 1:17 says, "Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, and cometh down from the Father of lights, with whom is no variableness, neither shadow of turning." So yes, that verse doesn't align as much with, the name John, but 1:17 talking about a perfect figure from above maybe has something, but then again, we're kind of calling Master Chief Jesus again, which may be light blasphemy, but whatever.
Now, Isaiah mentioned this, but if you do choose to blaspheme and interpret the Master Chief as a Christ-like figure, then the passage John 1:17 actually makes a lot of sense. Now, granted, Chief has never been confirmed by anybody to be a Christ-like figure, but if you consider all of the other biblical references and analogies,
And all the things that he did for humanity and how many people that he saved, I mean, come on. Come on. He's basically the Jesus of the Halo universe. You don't have to dance around it. It's just a story. It's fiction.
that Bungie were designing Halo with from the very get-go, then it's not too crazy to assume that they also created and named the series protagonist to be a biblical reference as well. As for James 1:17, that does loosely describe Chief as well, but my view has always been that Chief was named after John 1:17 for obvious reasons. That passage says that Jesus Christ delivered grace and truth, which are two very active things to deliver, which I think are meant to be extrapolated to Chief delivering justice. So
his battle rifle's called Grace and his assault rifle's called Truth. That'd be cool if that was actual lore.
To speak to the Covenant and the Flood. As blasphemous as that analogy is, to me it makes perfect sense. The Covenant are a deeply religious alien hegemony who reside in the holy city of High Charity. They worship the Foreigners, who they believe to be gods, and also the Halos, their instrument that allowed them to transcend into the divine beyond. Their mission is commencing the Great Journey, which entails firing the Halos so that they can walk the same path as the Foreigners and transcend to become gods. But to do so, they have to travel to a location known as the Ark. The Covenant are led by the prophets of truth, mercy, and regret, but the irony is that
This is making me want to replay the Halo series. I'm probably going to do that on stream soon. I will do that on stream soon. It don't take long at all to run through that whole series.
lead hierarch, the prophet of truth, knows that the entire Covenant religion is a lie. A lie built upon a false translation, in fact. Upon discovering humanity, it turned out that the Foreigners had chosen them to follow in their footsteps, not the Covenant, thus invalidating their entire belief system. And so, the Prophet of Truth declared humanity the direct opposers to their religion and ordered their eradication, thus forming the basis of, well, almost the entirety of the Halo game stories.
And way to actually fill out the prophecy. That every time, like, oh, you're prophesied to be the chosen one? Well, I'm just gonna kill you all now then, so you can't be the chosen one. And then that's part of the prophecy.
The word covenant in the Bible is used for a lot of different things. One of the first times it's seen in the Bible is the covenant that God makes to Abraham, that he will be the father of many generations and that his people will be God's chosen people and what have you. But the most popular example of the word covenant in the Bible has to be the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant was a sacred item to Moses and his people that was so holy, in fact, that it was not allowed to be touched by human hands lest that person should die. The Ark of the Covenant was instead carried on these long poles and was brought by Moses and his people wherever they went. Inside of the Ark of the Covenant was the 10 Commandments, a jar of manna that fell from heaven, as well as Aaron's rod. 3 different items that were all a picture of God's promise and fulfillment to the people he was watching over. Again, Ark of the Covenant literally meaning the ark that things of covenants or promises were kept inside of. Now, is there a direct tie between the Covenant and Halo and the Ark of the Covenant? Not really.
I think they just thought it was a cool name and just went with it. And was like, it's biblical, let's use the name of it.
More so to say that the covenant in general means a promise or a prophecy that is to be fulfilled.
Prophecy.
And even if less correct or altruistic, that seems to be where the covenant of Halo get the inspiration of the name, considering they are on their own crusade, albeit right or wrong.
You proved me wrong instantly. Okay.
Yep, pretty much agree there. They're called the Covenant because they follow their prophecy of the Great Journey, and they wage a holy war against humanity in order to fulfill said prophecy. The Great Schism was a civil war within the Covenant that fractured their entire hegemony. For many years, the elites had been the Prophet's protectors, but truth saw the brutes as not only the stronger species, but also one more willing to follow orders without question, whatever those orders might be. In 2552, Truth and Mercy used the death of the Prophet of Regret as the catalyst for the changing of the guard, where the brutes replaced the elites as the Prophet's protectors. And then, shortly after, Truth ordered the brutes to assassinate all the elite High Counselors.
I don't know what happened, man. The elites were so much harder in Halo Reach. They got easier over time, I guess. Now the brutes are these big hulking monsters, and they have bosses that are hard, and they're rolling factions.
This massacre caused the elites to rise up against the Covenant, sparking the civil war that became known as the Great Schism. The result was that the elites ultimately allied with humanity to put their former masters down, of which they of course accomplished. Were it not for the Great Schism, then, well, there's a very high chance that the Covenant would have indeed begun the Great Journey and, yep, would have wiped the entire Milky Way galaxy of all sentient life. Praise the Lord for our hinge-head brothers.
The Great Schism of 1054 is the first huge branch that we see in Christianity. Basically, in 1054, several people within the Catholic Church were upset with how the Catholic Church was being ran, so they decided to create their own branch of Christianity known as Orthodoxy, or Orthodox Christianism. Orthodoxy is still a very large group within Christianity to this day, and this was really the only branch off of Catholicism that existed until Martin Luther came along and the Protestant movement began. So using phrases like the Great Schism definitely harkens back to the real world Great Schism that happened when Orthodoxy separated off of Catholicism.
I don't think I really need to add much else to this, to be honest with you. Although the elites didn't create their own religion, some elites who split from the Covenant continued to believe in the Great Journey after they left the religion. They just kind of believed in it in their own way, separate from the prophets and the Covenant. But the meaning of the Great Schism here is very objective and I think very easy to interpret. Okay,
and as it goes along the generations, it's going to get muddied and turn into something completely different than what it started out as. And it probably already has become muddied compared to what it originally started out as for the Covenant in the first place. I used to read the books. I don't know much about it anymore. It's been so long. When you read stuff and consume this content as a child, you don't really retain it as much as if you go back and consume it again as an adult.
You guys know the deal by now. I partnered with Apex Gaming PCs to create the coolest Flood-themed PCs on the market. We've got a whole line of Flood-themed builds here of various tiers to choose from. Just hit the link in the description and pick one of these bad boys up today. The Ark is the birthplace of the Halos, and one of the few locations in the entire galaxy that is protected from their pulse. It was built by the Foreigners for, well, a number of reasons. Firstly, to construct the Halo rings, and secondly, to allow the librarian to shelter a number of innocent species so that they could survive the firing of the Halos. But the ultimate reason all of this was necessary was the Flood. The Ark was the main way the Foreigners hoped that life could survive the onslaught of the Flood.
The Ark has to be one of, if not the most famous symbols taken out of the Bible. The only thing that gives it a run for its money is the cross. The cross. The book of Genesis tells us that there was a man by the name of Noah, that humanity had grown so wicked and intertwined with demons and effects of the supernatural that the world had to be reset except for Noah and his family. So God told Noah to build an ark and bring onto the ark 2 kinds of every creature so that their species may be saved. So the great flood happens, Noah along with his sons and their wives survive, and the world becomes repopulated from there. Because of that, ark symbolism is used in a ton of media as a symbol of a safe haven or an escape from whatever is happening. Basically, it is a means for life to survive if all else is to fail.
And this is where the librarian's conservation measure comes in. The Ark was built, partially at least, so that she could house samples of every species that she had time to index, so that once the Halos were fired to stop the parasite, they could then repopulate the galaxy, and thus they could survive the Flood on the Ark. As far as subtle biblical references go, this is about the least subtle in the entire franchise. And this all brings us to the Flood. The Flood are the backbone of the entire Halo canon. They're an all-consuming parasitic life form created by the corrupted gods of the Halo universe. Not the Foreigners, the true gods of the universe.
And like Halo was a fun, cool alien shooting game until the Flood come out of nowhere and all of a sudden it's a horror game.
The precursors, of whom the Foreigners once exterminated. In an act of vengeance, the precursors then returned following their extermination, but corrupted into the Flood, and consumed almost all of the galaxy before the Halos were fired to stop them. Halo's entire story always ultimately comes back to staving off a galactic apocalypse at the hand of the Flood. The Flood are the Alpha and the Omega of the universe, and they will always exist as a persistent, horrifying threat to all life.
Off of what I talked about with the Ark, the Flood is the opposite of the Ark. If the Ark is the thing that saves humanity, the Flood is the thing that destroys it. A flood is a natural disaster that seeks no survivors. It is total, and it is devastating wherever it hits. Hence why the worldwide flood was the method of eliminating life on Earth. Needless to say, it's pretty easy to see where the Flood in Halo draws inspiration from the Great Flood, as being an all-encompassing threat that will destroy humanity if it happens.
In fact, no, I lied a minute ago. This is the least subtle in the entire franchise. So, where the worldwide flood in the Bible threatened all life on Earth, the Flood in Halo threatened, and continue to threaten, all life in the galaxy. So, the apocalypse isn't...
And the universe? What do you mean just the galaxy?
...specific named thing or entity or event in Halo, but rather it's a constant undertone of the entire franchise's story. The Covenant, for a time, were the harbingers of the apocalypse. For 27 years, humanity were locked in a violent war with the alien hegemony who threatened to fire the Halos and wipe literally everything out. But in the end, we prevailed. But of course, the main harbingers of the apocalypse in Halo are the Flood. As I said before, they are the Alpha and the Omega, the corrupted remnants of our gods. The entirety of Halo is built around the Flood, both in and also out of universe. I mean, the titular Halos were built with the sole purpose of preventing them from consuming literally everything, and thus preventing them from bringing about a goal.
Man, the rings of Halo, such a cool concept, but I hope we never get to that point in our sci-fi future. That's most definitely gonna happen. By the way, Halo is based on a bunch of different things, but the idea of the rings are based on Ringworld by Larry Niven, at least somewhat, a lot based on Ringworld. Great book. Great book. Highly recommend if you like to read books, especially if you're a sci-fi nerd.
Galactic apocalypse.
When most people think of a biblical apocalypse, they think of the Book of Revelations. The Book of Revelations was a vision given to John, hotly debated which John in particular, but a John showing him the end of the world through a series of visions and dreams. The details of this apocalypse are highly debated and also well known. Things like the rapture, things like the second coming, things like the tribulation, etc. Effectively, if the Bible is the story of humanity and our existence, then the apocalypse is the end of that story. At least the end of humanity as being separate from God as we know today.
Now, the fact that the Book of Revelations was actually given to John and that John was the one that had all the visions of the apocalypse is something really interesting that I actually had no idea about, and it makes me wonder if that's yet another reason that Bungie ended up calling Chief John. Because whether it was via the Flood or the Covenant or really any other enemy, John is always the one who is ultimately subverting the apocalypse that foe threatens. Now, Genesis 6:17 isn't directly in Halo, however, the first planet to ever be infected by the Flood during the Forerunner Flood War was called G617G, of course referencing Genesis 6:17. G617G, or Seaward as it was called by the Forerunners, was an extremely important world as it was where the Flood, that at the time many believed to be entirely eradicated, were first encountered again, and it was where the first outbreak of the war that led to the firing of the Halos took place. The planet was right on the edge of Forerunner space, which made calling for help when the Flood arrived literally impossible. The colony was quietly and violently consumed by the parasite, and was the first of tens of thousands of infected.
That is actually terrifying. That does sound like a plot to a sci-fi horror movie, and it just makes me mad. Like, you could have had a whole Halo series on just that aspect of this planet being taken over by the Flood. Could have had 3 seasons of it. Had nothing to do with Master Chief, and it would have been successful. But they just don't know how to make good stories anymore.
Infected colonies to come.
Genesis 6:17 is God speaking to Noah just before the flood and ark and all that I mentioned earlier. In it, God says, "And behold, I, even I, do bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life from under heaven, and everything that is in the earth shall die." So, needless to say, God here talking about the flood is coming, and then it being the designation for the place that the flood shows up in Halo. Unlike the John 1:17 thing, that is a pretty easy comparison, I think.
So Halo's biblical references even transcend the game and the story. They're even woven into the soundtracks. On Assault on the Control Room in Halo 1, when you first venture outside into the Arctic tundra, the song On a Pale Horse plays. This song was later rearranged for Halo 3 soundtrack, playing when you're clearing an LZ for the Dawn on the Ark, and this time being renamed to Behold a Pale Horse.
Ooh, that's such a good level too. I liked that whole area.
The Pale Horse has to be the most famous of the 4 horsemen mentioned in the book of Revelations. Again, Revelations concerns John's visions of the end of the world, and in the realm of visions, John says that he saw 4 horsemen coming forward at the beginning of the apocalypse. The first is Conquest, which rides in on a white horse. The second is War, which rides in on a red horse. The third is Famine, which rides in on a black horse. And then finally, the Pale Horse is Death. So whenever you hear the mention of a pale horse, that is quite literally an embodiment of death itself. Specifically, the wording from the Bible in Revelations 6, chapter 8 is, "And I looked, and behold a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him." So a lot of gravity.
So, like, either Master Chief is Jesus to humanity, or he is the pale horse to the Covenant. Could be both, I guess, at the same time. Because he is definitely there to destroy all of the Covenant. And pretty much does single-handedly cause the downfall of the Covenant.
To the symbolism of the phrase, "Behold a pale horse," as it might as well be the equivalent of the Grim Reaper.
So I actually don't think that there was ever really meant to be any...
Or really, like, means the Flood, but also is the Flood following Master Chief? Because everywhere he goes, he somehow survives, and the Flood's there destroying everything every time.
hard biblical implications behind these tracks referencing...
And hell followed with him.
Death and the Pale Horse, but if you want to look at it more broadly, you could say that because both of these tracks play during sections where Chief's mowing down the Covenant, that Chief himself is the Pale Horse. It's definitely a loose reference, but I'm
For the Covenant, you know, maybe even for the humans.
I mean,
Prophecy.
Chief does cause a hell of a lot of death. You could say that he's the Grim Reaper of the Covenant, of the Flood, of the Prometheans, of just about everything else, so I think it kind of works. Okay, Dante's Inferno is it's a really weird one. So, in Halo, it's mostly confirmed that Halo 3 ODST's story is based on the ancient Italian epic of Dante's Inferno, where Rookie takes the place of Dante and Virgil, well, takes the place of, I'll let you guess who. You know, I'll let Isaiah explain this one first, and then we'll talk about how it relates to ODST afterwards.
Dante's Inferno is not a biblical work in the sense that it is from the Bible, but it was an early Catholic by the name of Dante Alighieri of Italy. It was his kind of fictional depiction of biblical events, or at least his portrayal of them. Dante's Inferno is the first of 3 parts of a series known as the Divine Comedy, a series which I covered on my channel, shameless plug. In Dante's Inferno, Dante walks through all 9 circles of hell.
The only thing I know about Dante's Inferno is the video game for Xbox 360, and I loved that game, and it's kind of rough around the edges and doesn't really hold up that well. Highly recommend playing it though, it's weird and cool and fun. There is a giant lady with nipple titties. Nipple titties? Tongue nipple titties. That's what I meant to say. Nipple titties. But she got tongue nipples. It's weird. Good game.
In order to follow after his love, Beatrice. And then the other parts of the Divine Comedy are him walking through purgatory and heaven. But Dante's Inferno is the part about hell and the part that everyone remembers. In Dante's Inferno, Dante is very afraid and new to all of the supernatural things he's seen, so he is led by a guide, a poet from Rome named Virgil. In life, Dante looked up to Virgil's writings, and here in the afterlife, Virgil is his guide who carries him through and explains a lot of the things Dante sees. So Dante is a figure who is very afraid and very new to this world that he's encountering, and Virgil is someone who's lived in it for over 1,000 years and is able to impart that knowledge onto Dante. Effectively, Dante and Virgil... Also,
I played a lot of the Devil May Cry series. Dante, Virgil, you know. There's a lot of similarities there from those stories.
Exist as the quintessential early guide of a rookie and a mentor walking through an unknown and terrifying world.
And you know what? It's very funny that you mentioned Rookie, my friend, because, well, in Halo's analogy of Dante's Inferno, the Rookie is literally called the Rookie. The Rookie takes the place of Dante, whereas Virgil is, well, Virgil in Halo, the subroutine of New Mombassa's superintendent AI that subtly guides the lost rookie through the deserted nighttime streets of New Mombasa. Virgil uses billboards and road signs and other implicit forms of guidance to guide the rookie towards clues that eventually reunite him with the rest of his squad. Now, the references to Dante's Inferno in ODST go far, far beyond this. If I was to sit here in this video and discuss them, we'd be here for hours. A long, long time. So if you
now time to get us a Halo Dante's Inferno video. Let's go. It's easy money right there. You got the idea. Do it.
If you guys want to see me make a whole dedicated video comparing the two, then, well, let me hear it down below in the comments.
Yeah, you're gonna do it.
The prophets were the leaders of the Covenant. Confined to gravitic wheelchairs, these deeply zealous elders were believed by those beneath them to be the most devout of their religion, the most righteous believers of the great journey who would guide them all to the great beyond. But, as we discussed kind of earlier, all prophets were technically actually false prophets because the religion that they were preaching was based upon a mistranslation. The existence of humanity as the reclaimers of all the foreigners left behind entirely falsified their idea of the great journey and them being chosen by the foreigners to walk into the divine beyond. However, not all the prophets knew this. In fact, the prophet of truth was technically the only false prophet in the entire covenant, as he was the only one who knew about this.
Prophets and false prophets are mentioned a lot in the Bible. Prophets are people, especially before Christ, who are given the ability to prophesy of things that are to come, or essentially receive visions or knowledge of what the future will hold. And most of the time, God picks prophets to either tell groups of people or rulers of what they should do or what will become of their rule, of the earth, of the kingdom, etc. At the same time, several false prophets appear in the Bible as well. These are either people who are prophets of other gods, gods in the Old Testament like Baal or Dagon, who perform sort of hedonistic rituals or rituals of violence in order to try to usurp the place of God in the Old Testament. Or in the New Testament, there's examples of false prophets who claim to be preaching in the name of Jesus, but doing everything wrong or doing it to self-serve themselves. So they are either prophets of a different God, or they are prophets who claim to be of the same God, but are doing it wrong, most of the time maliciously. Typically, it can be told by their agenda and what they're saying, but it is an important message within the Bible itself, and with us in the modern age, to beware of people who claim to be one thing and are actually doing another.
Well, the prophets were called the prophets because they are textbook examples of prophets, except in this example, they're prophets of the covenant and their religion. And Truth was a false prophet because despite knowing the covenant religion to be a lie, he continued to preach it to control those beneath him and to maintain the immense power that he'd achieved in his ascent to the top of the covenant. And so, those are almost all of the major biblical references in Halo. Of course, that's not all of them, because if I was to do all of them, then this video would be longer than your average iceberg video. Maybe at some point we'll do that. I do want to say though, thank you.
Let's do a part 2, and then part 3, and then part 4. Just make a series.
So much to Isaiah for coming on. I've been a huge Wendigoon fan ever since his Black Parade video dropped, and getting to meet him at Range Day last year and also this year and actually become friends with him and then talk about this idea for a video and him be willing to come on is honestly this is a pipe dream moment for me, to be honest with you. This is a bucket list moment. So Isaiah, my friend, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you very much, Hidden Xperia, for having me on the channel and letting me rant about weird biblical stuff. It's always my favorite. And you all can check me out at Wendigoon if you're interested, but above all else, thank you all for watching, and thank you again for having me on the channel.
Go and sub to the man if you somehow haven't done so already. And so, with that said, I'm going to round this one out there. I want to give a huge thank you to all of my amazing
Halo-based game. Based series, not so based anymore. Bungie Halo, based. When Bungie had it, there was nothing like it. That lore was so deep, and even though it was just based on Christianity, but that's based AF, man. Based as fuck. I love Halo so much.